You're listening to the Mind Your Own Business podcast, aimed at helping photographers learn how to make the leap from amateur to pro. Hello and welcome to Mind Your Own Business, a joint effort brought to you by Photofocus and Skip Cohen University. This is Shamira Young, and I'm joined by my co-host and visual storyteller, Skip Cohen. Skip, what's up?
Today I am a visual storyteller.
So accurate. Yes.
Well, I don't know about the visual side. We're actually getting all the rain that the rest of the country's been getting down here in Florida. So
wow.
Visually, the day is just a little bit gray and cloudy. But boy, I got stories. And our guest today has got stories.
Yes.
In fact, while all our guests on Mind Your Own Business have been great, today's really continues to show there are simply no boundaries whatsoever to creativity. Rick Sammon is with us, and he's a photographer. He's an artist, a musician, a scuba diver, a podcaster, an author, educator, also a husband, and he's a great friend to so many of us in the industry. And if I spend the amount of time his accomplishments deserve, we won't have a podcast today. It'll just be me talking about everything that Rick has done in his life. But the short version, he's all about setting the standard for a passion for life and, in turn, imaging. Now, I know there at least are coming up on close to 40 books out there with his name on them, and often his favorite co-author, his wife, Susan. And it's such a kick to get a spot in his schedule to join us today. Now, with so many years and incredible experiences in photography, we're going to talk about some of the best lessons Rick's learned over the years. He's also working on a new book that I know is going to be remarkable. It's called Phototherapy, and it's the perfect foundation to set the stage for today's podcast. So, hey, buddy, if you're still here, this is going to be the cue for your lips to move. Welcome to Mind Your Own Business.
Well, thank you guys for having me on the show. And Skip, thank you for reading that great introduction that my mother wrote before she died. I mean, it was perfect.
You know what's funny?
You couldn't have said it better.
Like three things. I always write an introduction out so I don't forget them.
Yeah.
Or don't forget what I want to say. So I'm glad because your mom sent it over to me and much appreciated.
She did a good job.
And her check's in the mail.
Okay. But seriously, thank you guys so much. I follow your podcast. I follow your work. I've known Skip for 100 years. So it's really a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. Didn't we both intern with Matthew Brady?
Yes, the great Civil War photographer. He claimed to be a photojournalist, but for the listeners who don't know, he was billed as a photojournalist, but during the Civil War, he would actually move cannons and guns and bodies around. He would make the picture.
Ooh, so, see that?
Yeah, yeah, I tell people there's a big difference between, being a travel photographer like I am and being a photojournalist, right? The photojournalist should tell the truth.
Is that it? Well, I just read I read a quote the other day that was just great. It just said, "Don't believe everything you read on the internet." It was signed by Abraham Lincoln. So that's another statement. All right. So Shamira, would you get this party under control?
This is going to be a fun one. I can tell. Rick, it is such an honor to have you on the show. And we always kick off our first question with just asking you to tell us a bit about yourself, your background. You can fill in some of the holes from the intro that Skip gave you, the amazing intro. Could you just briefly kind of tell us how you ended up doing what you're doing today?
Well, it's a very long story. I started out, I went to Berklee College of Music in Boston. I wanted to be a musician. After I got out and I was teaching piano and guitar lessons, there was a lot of downtime. So during that downtime, I would take pictures. And then I saw a photo magazine. I sent in, Skip, do you remember Rudy Mayersky?
Sure do.
I sent in
Rudy and Ed.
And Ed Wagner. So I sent in this picture to Studio Photography magazine. The first picture I ever sent anywhere, by mail, by the way. This was in 1975, 1976, and they published it. Then they asked me to write an article, and they published it. And then, Skip, you'll like this, Rudy Mayersky, with no experience, asked me to be the editor of the magazine, editor of Studio Photography and Photo Processing, and the Photokina Daily and the PPA Daily with no experience. So he gave me a chance. And I said, okay, because, you don't make a ton of money teaching guitar lessons in 1975 for $7 a half an hour. So then Minolta got to know me. Did you ever know Al Shapiro?
Sure did.
He was at Bozell Jacobs, which became Bozell Jacobs, Kenyon and Eckhart.
And that's where Steve Rosenbaum was too.
And Steve Rosenbaum was there, and Minolta needed someone to head up the account at Bozell. So with no experience in advertising or PR, Al Shapiro hired me to be vice president group supervisor of the account. And I was there for 10 years. But just backing up a little bit, when I was at Studio Photography Magazine and Photo Processing Magazine, one day the boss, Mr. Mashke, asked me to fly to Texas to do a story on a photo lab. The last thing in the world I'd want to do, get on a plane and go around, and look at all the people in the photo lab, putting film in envelopes and stuff like that. Well, it turns out that the head of that photo lab, his name was Bernard McFadden, he was the head of a marine conservation organization called on the side, a not-for-profit 501c3 called CDAM International, which is an acronym for Conservation Education, Diving, Archaeology, and Museums. So the guy likes the article that I wrote. Bernard McFadden likes the article. And he says, well, you know what? We need an editor for the newsletter. I said, well, what do you need? He says, well, you have to learn how to scuba dive, take underwater pictures, and you have to go to Belize, Central America in 6 months. Make a long story short, I did all that, and 2 years later, I'm president of the Marine Conservation Organization, CDEM International, which took me all around the world. So then I got out of the advertising agency in 90, and I started doing what I'm doing now, writing books. I've condensed the story. There were a lot of things going on in between, but 40 books later, 18 Kelby 1 classes, seminars, workshops. Being a dad is my number one. Actually, having my son be proud of me is my number one priority in life.
That's a good one. Well, I know I have caught up to you over the years at virtually every photo show. I think we caught up at the DEMA show.
Oh, yeah.
Once when Bob Rose and I were walking around the show. And if it's got anything to do with anything with a camera in your hands, odds are you have been there or written about it. And speaking of writing about it, let's set the stage and talk a little bit about phototherapy and all the components of the last few years, well, of your career in this industry and how it ties in with some of the lessons you've learned, which is something we talked not long ago about on your podcast.
Right. Well, I'm on Twitter, and I see this book on Twitter. It's called Bird Therapy, and it talks about the therapeutic value of watching birds. And we have a lot of birds up here where we live in Florida, Skip. You have great birds down there, right, on the East Coast and the West Coast. So it just popped into my mind if, phototherapy, because, a lot of my friends feel that you get in the zone, that taking a picture is very, very therapeutic, or making a picture is very therapeutic. So I came up with this idea. So now I just finished the book. It's 35,000 words. So my fingers hurt a little, but I really think this will help people. I think it has no pictures in it. So in the front of the book, I have a spoiler alert. And I tell people that there's 35,000 words in here and no pictures. I say to myself, I said, if it's going to have no pictures, the writing better be pretty damn good. So I put everything I have into this. My son asked, Dad, how long did it take you to write? At first I said, well, it took me 3 months writing 3 to 4 hours a day. But then I realized that it took me 70 years, because I'm 70 next year, almost 70 years, because this is really a lifetime of experience. One of my favorite chapters in there is called Emotional Intelligence for Photographers. Daniel Goleman has this book, Emotional Intelligence, which is a bestseller. And what he talks about in that is we have to be aware of everything that's going on around us and our effect on other people. And I think as photographers, like when we're photographing people, right? When we're photographing people, we have to be aware of our body language, our expression, our mood, our feeling. There's an old expression that the camera looks both ways. In picturing the subject, we're picturing a part of yourself. It's a Freeman Patterson, a photographer who lives in Canada, expression. So I talk about that in the book, and I talk about another chapter is it sounds funny. It's never too late to be what you might have been. Now, I'm sure none of us on this podcast are going to be brain surgeons, but we could be better photographers. We could be better people. We could be better writers. And I think if we believe in ourselves, and which is just so important, getting back to my son, when he was growing up, I think instilling a sense of self-esteem in a person is like the most important thing you can do. I think if you believe in yourself, you could really do anything. So anyway, I put all these experiences together, and I have some technical information. I have a chapter in there on light therapy and color therapy, and I talk about color blindness in there. But I think someone reading this, at the end of each of the, I think it's 22 chapters or so, I have a mission. Skip, remember Mission Impossible?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so
well, wait a minute. I'm not, you and I are pretty much the same age, but just because Shamara is a little younger than we are, she knows Mission Impossible.
She
doesn't know. She doesn't know she may not have seen
the original one, right? On TV, on black and white TV, right?
On black and white TV.
I have not seen that one.
And Lassie, actually, I just saw the star of Lassie on Twitter. He looks just the same. But anyway, getting back to what we were talking about, it's really never too late to be who you could have been if you believe in yourself. It's just so important. And the Mission Impossible thing, actually, I have all the missions in a chapter, and I have a mission at the end of each chapter. In Mission Impossible, Mr. Phelps, if you choose to accept this mission, right? So I challenge the people to follow these missions. If I could give you a funny one, I'll tell you if I have time.
We'll go.
Okay, some of your listeners probably don't know of Edward Weston. Skip, I know you guys know of Edward Weston because you're a photographer. His most famous picture is that black and white picture of a green pepper. And if you could describe that in one word, I think you'd say sensuous, right? Or sensual. It's an amazing picture, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, by the way, it's a 4-hour exposure and at f240, which is not a typo in my book. F240, he was using his view camera close to the pepper, and he actually had to make his own aperture. So it made it like a pinhole camera. So anyway, I'm doing research on Edward Weston, and he's talking about that the importance, if you want to be creative, he's talking about photographing, get this, your toilet bowl. And he says that he's photographing his toilet, and he's looking at the curves and the shapes. And he said it reminded him of the Nike statue, the Greek statue, of the Winged Victory statue that's in the Louvre. Mm-hmm. He's saying those curves and shapes reminded him of that, except without the toilet bowl didn't have, the imperfections of the human body. So Weston was amazing. And I figure if he could talk about and get a great picture of this Greek statue, that was created in the 2nd century BC, and since 1984, it's been in the Louvre. I think this is a good way to, expand our creativity.
I don't think I'm ever going to look at a toilet bowl quite the same way.
Well,
in fact, most of us don't usually take a very good look at our toilet bowls anyway.
I try not to.
Shamara, you got to get us out of this with a question here. Save us.
Oh, well, as I'm listening, Rick, so what I'm loving about your book is that it addresses the very topics that set apart the happy, fulfilled, long-term photographers from those that just kind of seem to burn out or who are stuck in the daily grind. It sounds like your book is a breath of fresh air. And even just when you mention body language, that is so true. During photo sessions with clients, the way that I notice with my clients that they tend to reflect my attitude, my body language.
Yes.
If I'm nervous, they are nervous. Even if I don't say I'm nervous, they pick up on that energy. And so all that to say, your book sounds like it's right on point. And I'm curious how you even, pick the topics. Was it just based on what other photographers are struggling with, or?
I would say it's based on what I thought might help people. I've been teaching workshops and giving seminars for a long time, before you were born. Right, Skip?
Well, I've done my best in working with Shamara to never say, and before you were born.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway.
Yeah.
We've been around a while. But anyway, so I get a lot of questions. And,
Yeah.
this is really interesting, I think. This is actually what got me started with this book. When I started, okay, I thought it'd be like about, maybe 5,000 word ebook. Then it got to 10. Then it wound up being like 35,000 words. But here's what got me started. When I give a workshop, I asked a question that I first asked the workshop students in Montana. So we're in Montana. The workshop had finished. We're sitting around a campfire. There were fires in the mountains. So there was like smoke and the sunset. It was so beautiful, and everyone got amazing pictures. So I asked the people this question at the end of the workshop, and I think it'd be good for your listeners to ask themselves this question. So here it is. What does your photography mean to you? Now, the answer is not, oh, I like to photograph butterflies, right? Or, I started photography in 1976 or whatever. So these are some of the comments. I have the chapter open here. What does your photography mean to you? And I'll just go through a few. One person said, an escape, everything, exploring, influence others, my social life, reveal secrets. I like that. I like all of them. The way I write history, love and happiness, freedom, art heals, a better way I can make art, living legacy. And here's one I really like, save my life. And it's even like now when I think about when the person said that, I get a little chill on my arms. My hairs are standing up. For a lot of people, photography is so important, right? And it has saved people's lives. Yes. It gives them an outlet. Ron Clifford, in addition to Skip, is one of the contributors, and he talks about his bipolar disease, and he's very revealing in this, and he talks about how photography and traveling is very therapeutic. So, I learned a lot doing this because when you write a book, or when I write a book, I feel I have a tremendous responsibility to the reader, and I don't want to leave any questions unanswered. I try to research everything. I try to answer, maybe I don't accomplish that goal all the time, but I try to give it my all, because you have to respect the reader. Same thing in a seminar, right? The same thing in the portrait session that you were talking about. Sarah Lean, National Geographic photographer, I heard her speak. She says the most important thing is respecting the subject. So whether a subject is a person, whether it's a reader, whether it's, a listener, you guys respect the audience. We were joking around before, and I said, well, I'm not going to use this word. I'm not going to use that word. We're respecting the audience.
Absolutely.
Wow. You just created a whole foundation for probably 3 more podcasts. But staying with this one, when you talked about, saving your life and what photography's done, what's interesting is that so often, and I found this in my own right. I mean, I don't make a living as a photographer, but I'll match my passion for clicking the shutter with anybody. My passion is on the business and marketing side, but there's also situations that come up where the photography is very therapeutic, and I will go out. We've got a butterfly garden in the back, and I'll take something new from Panasonic that they've sent me out back and start playing with, trying to make myself a little bit better in terms of my skill set, whether it's on macro or dragging the shutter or something that I'm doing out back, and that's therapeutic. But then the other side of it, which is the way we as an industry have an impact on the entire world, is in what those photographs themselves mean to people. In your book, and I was really honored that you asked me to contribute something to it, but, I talked about Molly the Wonder Dog, and I still tear up because I miss her, and she was by my side for 13 and a half years, and there's anybody out there that's ever lost a pet that doesn't understand. But it's the photographs that I have that help me and get me through it. It's the same when every year something comes up. Usually my dad's birthday was on Halloween, so it's pretty hard to get by Halloween without a bittersweet smile over all those years that he never had a birthday dinner, because as kids we all wanted to go out and trick or treat. But it's the photographs that I have that keep dad's memory and my mom's memory and a lot of good friends. I mean, you mentioned Rudy Maschke in the beginning of this. You and I share a mutual friend with Steve Rosenbaum, and he and I will swap old images now and then because he finds a photograph of something from somebody back in usually it's the mid to late 80s, which is when I started Hasselblad. Well, those photographs and what we as an industry give the world, that also is part of that life-saving process. And that's just so cool. It's not just, I mean, we're sort of talking as photographers and how photography is life-saving, but all those images that our industry has created adds to that. And I didn't mean to get so long-winded. I got on my soapbox there, didn't I?
No, your story about Molly the Wonder Dog, how important those pictures are to you. I just told my son I found a picture of us playing in the backyard, and I don't have the negative. That picture, I wouldn't trade it for a new Martin D35 or two Martin D35 guitars because the pictures are so very, very precious. Just quickly about Steve Rosenbaum, I thank him in the book. He's the last in the acknowledgments section. I went to see him early on when I was talking to Rudy Maschke and everything. I showed him my pictures because I wanted to be in the magazine, and he looked at me and just said, "Sammon, learn how to write." So now, 40 books later, I took his advice.
Well, he was publisher of Modern Photography,
right.
and then Pop bought them out, and essentially just bought them out for the subscriber base, and the magazine disappeared. And it's just, I guess one point that I'd love to make, if Portia Mara, she's not getting a word in today, to all our listeners, this is a very small industry. And one of the fun things, even as Rick and I start to go back and forth here, the longer you're in the industry, the more lives you touch, the more lives touch yours, and the more it becomes like the 3 degrees of separation with Kevin Bacon, like the game, because it is a very, very close industry. So many photographers have diverse backgrounds, but there's a common denominator. And it's like you talking in the beginning about the different companies you worked for, and Minolta was in there. And I work a lot with Tom Curley, who's over at Panasonic now, and I met him when he was over at Fuji. And you go through, there's so many of us that have these diverse backgrounds that we've all connected at some point. And it is a very interesting industry in that somehow you could pick out any name and trace back how many different people knew that person or how they affected your life. Tony Corbell is a good example.
Oh, yeah.
Because half the people listening to this podcast, in fact, I'll bet you all the people listening to this podcast can trace somebody back and get to 2 or only 3 degrees of separation to Tony and a class or a program or something.
Well, you're talking about people we meet. I have a lot of quotes. I'm very big on quotes, very big on quotes. And there's a quote that I use in the book, and it goes like this: "We are a part of everyone we meet." And it's true, right? This is how we develop our personalities. We meet people, we like the traits that we incorporate them into our personalities. We meet people we don't like, we don't incorporate those traits into our personality. So it's so important to realize that. And Skip, by the way, congratulations on having emotional intelligence. When you said, oh, my co-host here is not getting the word in, that shows a sensitivity. That shows a sensitivity to what's going on. And so you're aware of all this stuff. And another quote, this is one of my favorites: "People want to know how much you care before they care how much you know." Right? I mean, everyone knows about the exposure triangle. So why would they come on my workshops to learn that? Because they might know that I really care. So caring is so important. Okay, that's it.
I've got like a page of notes right now.
We're just going to be quiet. And I'd like to welcome everybody to the Shamara Young Mind Your Own Business show.
You know what? I'm listening. I'm soaking up wisdom. I've got like a page of notes here. This is really cool. I do have a question that's a little bit of a change of topic somewhat.
Sure.
So, now more than ever, I mean, imagery photography and writing go hand in hand, whether you're telling the story behind a family portrait on social media, or you're writing blog posts, or even if you're a photographer working for a local magazine. I work for a magazine here in town, and it was like a 1-2 punch when they learned that I could take photos and write. And
Yep.
so, I mean, talk about having the discipline mastered for writing books. You are the man, Rick, as far as that goes. And so I'm curious, because a lot of photographers, they struggle with getting words down. And so do you have any, basic, writing tips for those who need discipline in that area?
Well, when Steve Rosenberg told me to learn how to write, I bought 2 books, Shogun, and I didn't take writing courses because this was back in 1977. You know, you'd have to go somewhere to take a writing course, or about 1977. And I bought this other book called Aztec. They were both about the same size. So these are giant books, right? And Aztec is a wonderful book. And I don't want to give what's going on away, but it has a big surprise, a really big surprise halfway through the book. But anyway, I think reading the work of others is a great way to learn. You know, getting back to another quote, Salvador Dali had a quote. He says, "Those who do not want to imitate anything create nothing." So whether you're trying to copy a picture or learn from, lighting from maybe a Rembrandt or a Vermeer or whatever, or you want to try to become a better writer, I think reading the writings of other people will definitely help. And as far as writing itself, it definitely takes discipline. And but you have to have an idea. And again, you have to believe in yourself. And I would also say that if you don't think you're a great writer, and I'm like the king of typos. Anyone who reads my blog post knows this. I feel, when my wife and I have a book out on the Oregon coast, so we read it, but then we send it to the editors, and they have a copy editor, they have a style editor, they have all these other editors. So it's kind of like Michael Jackson. When Michael Jackson was on stage, he'd have like 37 people making him look good. So if you're a writer, and you have a book publisher, the book publisher wants to produce the best quality work. So they have a team of writers. But it does take discipline. And for whatever reason, I know I'm driven. And it just, I don't know how I'm driven. I don't know why I'm driven, but I'm definitely driven.
I love that answer because it takes the pressure off. I think a lot of people think they need to be perfect, whether they're writing or even in the process of image editing. It's like kind of just getting your thoughts down is where you start. I mean, if people would see the articles I write, if they would see the first draft, it's sentence fragments, typos, the little red squiggly line in Word, where, like half thoughts, but it's that process of polishing it that I find almost as fun as editing a photograph. Bringing it, that process.
Yeah, well, one of the best-selling authors in the world is considered not the greatest writer. And he has like dozens of books that have been made into TV shows. Stephen King. People don't think some people technically, he's not a great writer. Well,
love it.
So what? Content, well, same thing with the photograph, right? Content is king.
Yes.
Content is king.
Well, it's funny. You mentioned you guys putting a book together and then an editor taking a look at it. I heard Guy Kawasaki spoke at a program, and we were both on the venue as speakers, and I was so honored. I'm there. I'm following Guy Kawasaki. That's not a bad place to be. But he talked about, for those people who don't know him, Guy Kawasaki he's got 1 million+ followers on Twitter. He was part of the Steve Jobs world. He's a remarkable writer, has a number of books out. But at the time, he was talking about his most recent book, which this is about 5-6 years ago, was all about self-publishing and writing your own book. And he talked about how he got the manuscript together. He had roughly, if I remember the story right, 30 or 40 associates and friends read the manuscript. And he handed it over to the editor, and he said, "You will never see a manuscript this clean." And I'm so proud of it. Well, the editor came back a week later with 1,600 errors and things to fix.
That's funny.
And I want to remind everybody that you're photographers and you're for the most part, if you believe in left brain, right brain, you are right brain creative types. And writing wasn't necessarily meant to be your strong suit, but one thing that is out there very specific to help you, and I'm not talking about those of you that are writing a book. I'm talking about those of you that are simply writing a brochure or a promotional offer or a paragraph or two on your website or blog. Use Grammarly.com.
Yep.
I use it constantly. Now, you have to read what their corrections are because they don't know the point you're trying to make. And often Grammarly will pick up something and suggest I change a word. And by changing it, the sentence would no longer make sense. But Grammarly is a tremendous help, especially with punctuation. So there's at least one minor tool out there just to get you through those 100 words that you're trying to put into. Maybe it's a letter to all your clients or your database. Maybe it's something you're trying to do in the community, or maybe it's just something you want to write on an article or something you're doing on your blog. And that'll help.
Well, for sure. Speaking of which, chapter 14 in my book is write a caption or even a book. And I give I make a suggestion there that if you're really new to writing, pick up a copy of National Geographic or download it or whatever. As you know, Skip, because I think I talked to somebody about this sometime. Maybe it was you. Anyway, most people don't read the articles. They look at the pictures and read the captions. So if you want to learn how to get right to the point, have that a few words with impact, read the captions of National Geographic, because you could get basically the gist of the story by looking at the, dozen or 16 or 18 pictures in an article just by reading the captions.
Well, I'm going to put you on the spot.
Yep.
If I had a picture of you at Woodstock in 1969, what would the caption be?
I hope he remembers this.
That's the caption. I hope he remembers this.
I hope he remembers this, because I actually have one picture of me. I have one picture of me at Woodstock. Listeners can find it on the web. Just type in Rick Sammon at Woodstock. Hair's down to my shoulders. But you were talking about Molly the Wonder Dog, and that one picture brings you back to the moment, right? Well, that picture of me at Woodstock sitting on the car with some of my friends, I'm 19 again. And I think that's another, actually, that was another thing. What does your photography mean to you? One person said it allows me to be a kid again. So photography can really do that. But what Skip wanted me to say is, before we got on, I told him that in 1969 I was naked dancing in the mud at Woodstock, 10 feet away from Hendrix and Crosby, Stills and Nash and my hero Santana. Speaking of Santana, can I throw in something about his masterclass?
Go.
Yes.
Okay. You know about the masterclasses, Ron Howard, Annie Leibovitz. So I play guitar, so I'm watching the Santana masterclass. And after I watched it, I realized he didn't tell me about how to play a D-minus seventh chord or how to bend a note or any theory. He talks about the most important thing in a picture, a painting, any work of art, and it's the feeling, it's the mood. Mm-hmm. And this really sums it up. He tells this story. He says, before Santana got to San Francisco, this was in the 60s, the flower power. He said the girls would be dancing around, listening to, the Jefferson Airplane and some of these other groups, the Mamas and the Papas. They'd be dancing around in their flowery dresses as if they were moving their hands up in the air as though they were catching butterflies. So you can visualize that, right? So he said after Santana came on the scene, the girls would go and they'd dance like they're moving around saying, like, come and get me. So it's the feeling of that, and that's what he talks about. He says, don't think about the notes. And Keith Richards said the same thing in Shine the Light, the Martin Scorsese film filmed at the Beacon here in New York. And Keith Richards says in that movie, I don't play the music, I feel the music. And I think that's what we have to do as photographers. If we look at a picture and say, oh man, he must have used a wide angle to get everything in the scene in focus. He used a wide angle lens, small aperture, focused 1/3 into the scene. He composed with I'm looking at a picture, composed with a foreground element that leads you into the scene. There's no negative space, everything's sharp. I don't want people to say that. I want people to say, wow, I feel as though I'm there. I wish I could be there. So it's really the mood, it's the feeling. that is so important in a picture. And I talk about that in phototherapy.
Love it.
Thank you. I love you guys. We could go on for hours.
Feel the love,
we
right?
could. In fact, we're just about out of time, but I just want to point something out, and it's another value of photography. My mother had Alzheimer's, which is what brought Sheila and I down to Florida in the first place, and that was to give my dad a hand. One of the greatest memories I have in those last few years, which were really tough, we could get the sun to come out from behind the clouds, which is what we were used to refer to when Mom had a truly solid, lucid moment. All we had to do was bring out an old album.
Yeah.
And what was amazing, and what's sad about Alzheimer's too, while her short-term memory, let's say over the last 20 years, was deteriorating and disappearing, we could pull out an album and she could give you the names of every one of her sorority sisters. Or she could look at a picture and it literally took her back to when she was in her 20s or 30s, or met my dad just after World War II. I mean, all those images and what they meant. And that to me is what makes our industry so incredible. It's the power of what photography does. And I don't care what you do in the photographic industry, whether you're a photographer behind the camera, whether you're a manufacturer and you're helping you're making great lenses over at somebody like Tamron or Panasonic with great cameras. I mean, put it all together. And no matter what you do in this industry, we provide a service to the world that's unlike anything else, with maybe the exception of modern medicine. Well, and man, that was on the soapbox. And Shamara, you better get a word in quickly before we're out of time.
No, you said it. That was amazing.
Well, the still picture definitely has more power. You know that picture of the Vietnamese girl? I think she was 12 years old.
Yeah.
You know, running from the napalm bomb. She was screaming in pain. That one picture, black and white picture, helped to stop the Vietnam War, more so than nightly broadcasts on CBS, NBC, and ABC. So it's the power of a picture.
And the photographer that captured that image is a Tamron shooter, and there was a great video because one of his favorite things to do now is to try and capture silhouette images of jet planes leaving LAX when there's a full moon.
Wow.
With the moon in the background. And I've actually got a podcast somewhere on the SCU site. Not a podcast, I'm sorry, a short video clip. That was his image. I'm sorry, I don't remember his name.
I have it in my book. I can't remember his name, but that woman, by the way, is doing very well now. She lives in Canada. She won the Peace Prize, a Peace Prize. So she's really doing great. So it's amazing.
So, Rick, Skip mentioned we're coming up on the end of our interview, but we'd love asking this final question, and I'm excited to hear your answer. What advice do you have for photographers who are just stepping into the industry?
Okay, here's my advice. I'm laughing. One of my good friends, Harry Benson, he's in his 80s. He was a Beatles photographer. He came over here with the Beatles. One of his most famous pictures is the Beatles pillow fight taken in New York City. He sold, tons of copies for tens of thousands of dollars. But anyway, he also has more covers for People magazine, I think, than any photographer, more spreads. An amazing photographer. When people ask Harry Benson, what's your advice for young photographers, he says, get a guitar. Meaning that, it's so hard, it's so competitive. My advice would be look at it as a business, that you have to look at your photography as a business. Now, when people ask me what my specialty is, I say my specialty is not specializing, meaning I like to do underwater photography, aerial photography, landscape portraits, macro, all this stuff, all these different types of photography. Now, people like my friend Jonathan Scott, the Big Cat Man, who has a series on Netflix and on the Animal Planet, a channel called Big Cat Diaries or Big Cat Tales. He focuses on photographing big cats. But for me, I think my advice would be in your photography, try to diversify, don't specialize, because it's the same thing with your investments. If you have all your investments in Coke or Pepsi or wherever, if the stock goes down, it's not so good. But if you invest wisely and diversify, and have a cush. Always, yeah, actually, I have so many different pieces of advice for people starting out, because you have to look at it as a business. Always live below your means, invest wisely, and make as much money as you can. Here's the last quote I'll leave you with. My father had a great expression. It takes a lot of peanuts to feed an elephant. Meaning, you don't have to go for selling a print for $10,000. If you could sell a print to someone, in your neighborhood for $25, all those peanuts will add up. Affiliate programs, Amazon affiliate program, all the plugins that you read about on Photofocus, these people all have affiliate programs. So remember that it takes a lot of peanuts to feed an elephant.
Good advice.
Very cool. Wow. And where can folks find you out online? I want to make sure and ask that too.
Yes, it sounds like Salmon the fish, but it's Rick Sammon, Sammon, ricksammon.com. All my books, Kelby One classes are there. The workshops and tours we have going to the high Arctic, Antarctica, and Greenland are there. So it's all there. Or if they swing by Croton-on-Hudson, New York, they'll see me in my backyard cutting my lawn, which I love doing. I'm serious. And weed whacking. I'm serious.
But you no longer run naked through the mud. Is that correct?
I don't run naked through the mud, but okay. You know what, guys? Here's some other advice. Cut your own lawn. I've cut my own lawn since we got married 44 years ago. And if you do the arithmetic, if it costs $25 or $50 to cut, it was maybe $25, back then. Now it's $50. If you cut your own lawn, by the time you're my age, 70, you could have enough to buy a BMW, maybe even a Tesla. I saved those peanuts.
And there it is. We have moved from photography to landscaping.
Life advice.
Rick, this has just been a kick catching up to you today.
Well, the camera looks both ways, guys, as I said before, but the microphone hears both ways. And you guys make it easy, make it fun for the guests, for the listeners, and just keep up the great work. And thank you so much. It's been such an honor.
Oh, it's our pleasure, let me tell you. And Skip, where can folks find you online?
It's always the same place. Everything I write is at skipcohenuniversity.com. And since Shamara is involved now with SAU, you'll find things from her as well there. I'm Skip Cohen on Twitter, Skip Cohen on Facebook, and my email is skip@mei500.com. And we always remind you listeners out there, if you've got a guest you'd like us to talk to, or you've got a particular topic you want us to explore, we want to hear from you. And as always, Shamara, where do they go to find you?
Folks can send me an email at shamira@photofocus.com. That's my first name, CHAMIRA, at photofocus.com. Yes, please send us your questions, your ideas, your feedback. We love it, and it absolutely shapes how we move forward with the show. And with that said, Rick, I want to thank you one more time, because this has been just amazing and too much fun.
Well, when you get as old as I am, you're 70, you have a lot of stuff to share. So thanks.
It's only a number.
Yep.
Absolutely. And we want to thank our listeners for joining us as well. Please tell your friends about this podcast, especially if they have the burning desire to improve their photography business and also their lives. We look forward to having you with us next time on Mind Your Own Business, brought to you by Photofocus and Skip Cohen University.